Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to a new video. I'm Bobbie and this is Bobbie Reads. It's Wednesday, so that means it's time for a new episode of Weird History You Never Knew You Need to Know. On today's episode, we are going to talk about a topic that I think has kind of been long awaited, and I think it's time. I think we're ready to do this. So today, you guys, we are going to talk about MKUltra. MKUltra is a very interesting topic. I'm amazed at how many people aren't aware of MKUltra and what it was and what it did. So let's go ahead and start at the beginning in case this is brand new information for you. So we're going to start the story where it seems like we always start the story, which is Nazi Germany, World War II. Nazi Germany, World War II. We're at the end of the war. And if you're familiar with World War II, there was two things happening simultaneously at the end of the war. So we had the Allies, which were the US, France, Britain, all coming in from the west side of Germany. And then at the time, Russia, well, it wasn't Russia, it was the Soviet Union, but the Soviet Union was considered an ally, but were they really? So the Soviets were breaching Germany on the east side. And so what was happening is that the Germans were being fought on basically two fronts, the Eastern and the Western front. And it was this mad kind of race, right, between the Allies and really all of the different countries to be the one that comes in and takes Berlin and, you know, is the hero, right, is responsible for winning the war. So what was happening about this time, so we're looking at about 1945, the end of World War II, and we have the US coming in and we have the Soviets, and what they're doing is as they are occupying these different areas of Germany, they're discovering a lot of different things. And what they're discovering is that there has been a lot of research and technological advances on a lot of different fronts. During the Nazi regime, the Germans focused a lot on research and development and different types of programs and different types of testing. And we know that a lot of experiments were conducted on prisoners in concentration camps, and many, many people died and due to these experiments, and they were very brutal. It was just the things that they did. One of the things that I've read, they did a lot of testing for pilots. So they wanted to know how pilots would react to different situations, high altitude, lack of oxygen, landing in freezing temperatures, freezing water. So they did all of these experiments on the prisoners of concentration camps. So there were prisoners that were routinely, frozen or just all kinds of just really horrific things. So all of that information was pretty in demand. They wanted to, all the different governments and all the different countries, they wanted this information. So what was happening was all of the, the Allies were gathering up as much as they could, and they were taking it back home, and they were not sharing this information. It became somewhat of a free-for-all, with each nation going in and gathering whatever intelligence or information that they could find, and then just kind of, whisking it away in this effort to keep it away from primarily the Soviets, but really anyone. But what the Allies maybe didn't realize at the time was that the Soviets were coming across their own fair share of documents and information. So both sides are gathering all of this stuff that has been happening in Nazi Germany. And there was some really interesting things I'm not going to get into in this video, but there is a book by Annie Jacobsen. I'll leave it in the description box down below. It's called Phenomena. And there's actually another book that I've been reading. I thought I had it close. I was going to show it to you, but I don't have it close. It's I forget what it's called, but it's like the UFOs, the CIA UFO files, or the UFO CIA files, something like that. But that book also has declassified documents that were obtained through the FOIA Act. And both of those books, they both talk about how the Germans had actually had prototypes and potentially even had constructed crafts that were very much like saucers and UFOs. So that's a whole other interesting thing that we're not going to get into in this video, but we will circle back around and talk about it. If you guys want to do that, let me know. Leave a comment down below and we'll see if anyone wants to see that. But there was a lot of really interesting things, and they were kind of on the cutting edge of technology. And so this was really interesting stuff. And this was information that had been gained. There was like terrible testing, right? So the testing and the experiments that were done, we would think wouldn't be recreated. Well, that's up for debate because a lot of it actually was recreated, but the idea is that this information is information that would be really hard to get again, because in theory, these types of tests and experiments should not be performed on humans. But okay, so we have the Soviets getting as much as they can, and we have the good old US getting as many documents and paperwork and intelligence as they can. In addition to this newly gained information, the US also recruited the top Nazi scientists, doctors, people who were involved in this technology, and recruited them to come work at the US. These were people who had, some of which had been found guilty at the Nuremberg trials for things including mass murder. But through Operation Paperclip, these scientists were able to be recruited and brought to the US. And again, there's a lot of really interesting books. One called Operation Paperclip by, again, Annie Jacobsen. She's a brilliant author. So I will link that book down below. And also, if you want to learn more about Operation Paperclip, I have done a video on it. So I will go ahead and link that video for you guys so that you can click on it and go check it out. So after reviewing all of the information that was discovered in Germany, the CIA became convinced that not only had the Nazis discovered a drug or a technique that would enable control of the human mind, but they also believed that the Soviets had gotten this information, whether they had developed it themselves or more likely had taken it from the Germans. And the CIA believed that the Soviets were using these techniques at that time. So in April of 1953, good old Allen Dulles, director of the CIA, ordered the development and the deployment of a similar mind control program that the CIA would be conducting. And this program would become known as MKUltra. The CIA wanted to use these techniques that were being used in German concentration camps and Japanese prisons, and wanted to use those techniques or a truth serum, if there was one, on its own captives. At the height of the Cold War, the project also attempted to produce an effective truth drug or truth serum for interrogating Soviet spies or people, suspected of being different spies. They wanted a way to give them a truth serum and then ask them questions and, reveal all of their secrets, basically. The MKUltra program was operated by a CIA chemist named Sidney Gottlieb, and Sidney Gottlieb was an American scientist. And he was put into this role, and he had very little oversight, both from his boss, who was Richard Helms, or from Allen Dulles, director of the CIA. Basically, they did not want to know what he was doing. Some of Gottlieb's experiments were covertly funded by universities and research centers, and others went completely under the radar with no one really knowing what was going on, taking place in American prisons and detention centers in Germany, in Japan, and also in the Philippines. Many of his unwitting test subjects were given tremendous amounts of LSD without their knowledge. Test subjects had to endure everything from being dosed with LSD to shock therapy and shock treatments and just a whole host of other things that were just terrible, that should not have been happening on the US's watch. A fun fact, in the early 1950s, the CIA actually spent $240,000 to purchase the world's supply, yes, that's the world's entire supply of LSD. Gottlieb began distributing that LSD to hospitals, prisons, different kinds of clinics and research centers, and was really just kind of distributing it to anyone and everyone that he could. And no one knew what he was giving them. It's even been said that Whitey Bulger, former mobster, who was incarcerated, was actually approached to participate in an experiment or a study on the treatment of schizophrenia. And so he signed up for this not knowing that it was part of MKUltra. And what happened was he was given a dose of LSD every single day for over a year. He says that it was horrific. He said that it was torture. He felt like he was going insane. And he'd actually threatened after the fact to find the person in the prison who had assisted in conducting these experiments on him and to seek revenge. He didn't do that prior to passing away, but I get it. I mean, could you imagine being forced to take LSD every day for a year, but not know that you're taking LSD? Hallucinogenics are an interesting thing. I have had an experience with ayahuasca, which I did a video about, and I'll link it so that you guys can check it out if you're interested. And I've also experimented a little bit with psilocybin, and I would not ever, and in very low doses, low quantities. I've never had an experience where I've been hallucinating, but even in those controlled, those controlled situations where I have had my experiences, I went into it knowing full, what I was going into, so that I could be prepared. And I had very low doses, but even then, if I didn't know, that would be a terrifying experience. I can't imagine what it would be like to be given LSD without your knowledge. And that is what brings me to Dr. Frank Olson. So let's talk about Dr. Frank Olson. He was a doctor who worked for the CIA. He has a military background. He started working for the CIA. His specialty was working with the airborne distribution of biological germs. So he was working with different things like sarin and with mustard gas and anthrax and things like that. And he was starting to really struggle with what he was doing for the CIA. So he was struggling morally with what he was doing and the things that he was involved in. And he had been talking to his family, talking to his wife, and had mentioned wanting to leave the CIA entirely. And he'd even mentioned doing something like going to school to be a dentist. He was very concerned about what he was doing ethically. And, he had had enough and he was wanting to get out of it. So around the middle of November 1953, Olson was invited to a place called Deep Creek Cabin or Deep Creek Lake, and it's in Western Maryland. It was a place where he went to often. It was where members from the CIA would come together. They would have meetings. They would discuss different things. So this wasn't an out of the norm event for him to go to or place for him to go to. He just kind of thought it was business as usual. But on November 18th, unbeknownst to Dr. Frank Olson, he was actually given a rather large dose of LSD without his knowledge. Olson became understandably upset, and this was really a major catalyst for him, where he was really pushed to being done at this point. He was done with the CIA and he was done with this experience. He said that it was one of the most frightening experiences that he had ever had. Well, obviously the CIA is going to be nervous because Frank Olson knows a lot of secrets, right? So they decide that they want to get Frank some psychological help to kind of help him through this tough time, right? Because he's struggling and he's not doing so well. So Frank's boss, who was Vincent Rouette, decided to take Frank to see a specialist right around Thanksgiving. So Frank was supposed to go home, see his family. His family was notified that he was going to be seeing this physician. His wife knew that, he had been having some psychological troubles and just some moral and ethical dilemmas. And so she, didn't really think anything of it. So Olson's trying to resign and leave the CIA, and his boss Rouette is trying to get him to take some time to think about it, and he wants him to meet with a psychologist in New York. The interesting thing is that the psychologist or the doctor that they were wanting him to meet in New York was actually an allergist. So that's always been a very interesting part of the story. Why would he be meeting with an allergist? So he was brought to New York by the CIA, by his boss and by some handlers. And he was checked into a hotel. He was going to stay the night in the hotel, and then he was going to leave the next morning to go see this doctor. Well, Frank Olson never made it to the doctor because at 2:25 a.m., he went out the window of the hotel that he was staying in. And for years, the story was that he jumped. He had a psychological break and he jumped through the window. When he hit, there was actually a doorman of the hotel who was there and approached him, and he wasn't dead right away, and he was trying to say something to the doorman. But unfortunately, the doorman could never understand what he was trying to say, and so no one knows what Frank Olson was trying to tell this man moments before he passed away. Something interesting, though, was that the hotel window was closed and the blinds were closed. So apparently he wanted to end his life by jumping through a closed window that had blinds in order to make it down to the street to end his life. That doesn't make any sense. And for years, this was the story that was given by the CIA. There's a really interesting documentary. It's a documentary slash kind of recreation, but done really well, called Wormwood on Netflix. And it's narrated, or kind of, the story is told by Dr. Frank Olson's son. And it is incredibly well done, and it is very informative, and it's going to give you so much more information that I can give you. So I would definitely recommend checking out that documentary if you are interested in learning more about Dr. Frank Olson. After years and years of the Olson family actually fighting for answers and for truth, eventually the CIA did disclose that he had been given LSD and that they were responsible for his death, but they've never come out and said that he was thrown out of the hotel window, which, anyone who can make sense of something can see that this man did not jump out of that window. He was thrown out of that window. So from 1953 to 1973, the CIA just kind of went unchecked with MKUltra. And then Richard Helms found out he was going to lose his job and be replaced because there was a new president in office, President Nixon. And one of his last acts as working for the CIA, director of the CIA, was to order the destruction of any document related to MKUltra. So in 1973, every document that they could possibly find that was related to MKUltra was destroyed. So no one knows the full extent as to what this program was doing. There were some documents that survived. There were some that were being stored in another place. And there was, different documents that they were able to, some information was able to come out and people were able to see what the CIA was doing. But the vast majority of what they did under MKUltra, we will never know. And that's really scary and really, really disturbing. I think it's important to note that the CIA runs basically on their own authority. So a lot of what they do is tied to Black programs, Black ops, and the Black budget. And so they really are able to kind of do whatever they want to do with very little oversight. We're seeing this today with all of the UAP hearings with Grush and all of the other people for disclosure for the UFOs and the UAPs and for all of those things. We're starting to see a lot of that come forward now. And so you have to wonder how much information was hidden and then destroyed under Richard Helms' watchful eye at the CIA. It's really, really concerning. And it's concerning to know that, they were using this terrible Nazi information and technology and research, as well as the same people, scientists, and again, physicians and people who were found guilty for mass murder at Nuremberg. Good old US, we just bring them over and say, hey, come work for us. Let's just continue these projects on these innocent, unknowing people. It blows my mind. So this was MKUltra. I hope that you found it interesting and insightful. I hope that you learned something new. If you like this kind of content, please give this video a thumbs up. That way I know to make more content like this. If you would like to see more content in regards to the CIA and learn more of what they did, there's a whole bunch of crazy stuff Alan Dulles, former director of the CIA, actually subjected his own son to MKUltra experimentation, which is crazy. So if you want to learn more about that, I can do a little video on that too. But I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I know that this was a long time coming and an interesting one. Thank you again so much for just hanging out and hearing what I have to say. Please be sure to leave your comments and your thoughts in the comment section down below. Definitely keep it friendly. Let's be nice. We're all friends here. We're going to be respectful. If you have not already subscribed, please be sure to hit the subscribe button on your way out. And if you would like to be notified of when I upload new content, also be sure to hit the notification bell. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.